The morning mist clung to the rooftops of Iron Ridge Pack territory like a secret refusing to be told. Alara Grayson moved through it with the kind of precision that came from years of making herself invisible while holding everything together. Her boots made soft sounds against the stone pathway leading from the administration hall. In her arms, a stack of patrol reports, 47 schedules, color-coded by sector, cross-referenced by warrior skill level and territory threat assessment. The kind of work that looked simple until you tried to do it yourself. 3 warriors jogged past, their breath visible in the cold air. "Morning, Alara. Thanks for fixing that rotation conflict yesterday." She nodded and offered a small smile. Kept walking. The pack house loomed ahead, all dark timber and iron fixtures built to withstand mountain winters and rival pack attacks. Somewhere inside, K.L. Ironwood was likely already awake reviewing reports she'd prepared the night before. Reports he'd read without comment, without acknowledgement, the way he'd done every single morning for the past 3 years. 1,095 mornings to be exact. Alara had stopped counting after the first year, then started again after the second. The number had become a companion, a reminder that endurance meant something, that loyalty eventually earned recognition, that love could be built from patience and perfect execution. She was wrong about that last part, but she didn't know it yet. The administration hall doors opened behind her. Magnus Holt emerged, Iron Ridge's beta, a man whose silver hair and weathered face carried the weight of decades serving beside Alpha Aldrich. He spotted Alara and his expression softened immediately. "You're up early again." "Council meeting at 9, Alara said. "Wanted to verify the supply inventory before the discussion." Magnus studied her for a moment. The same way he'd been studying her for months now, like a man watching someone walk toward a cliff edge in fog. "You work too hard. The pack needs—" "I know what the pack needs," Magnus interrupted gently. "I also know what you need, and it's not another 16-hour day trying to earn something you already deserve." Alara looked down at the reports in her arms. The edges were perfectly aligned. She'd made sure of that. "I should get these to the council room." Magnus didn't argue. He simply touched her shoulder once briefly, the gesture of a father who couldn't save his daughter from a choice she'd already made. Then he walked back inside, and Alara continued toward the pack house alone. The council chamber was empty when she arrived. Good. She preferred it that way, the quiet efficiency of preparation without audience. Alara arranged the documents across the long oak table with methodical care. Patrol rotations on the left, supply inventories in the center, trade agreements and territorial reports on the right. She stepped back, examined the layout. Everything in its place, everything perfect. The door opened. KL entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He was 29 now, broad-shouldered and sharp-featured, with dark hair that always looked like he'd just finished training, which he probably had. KL approached pack leadership the way he approached combat, with aggressive focus and zero room for softness. His eyes swept across the table, taking in the organized reports. For a moment, Alara thought she saw something in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Appreciation. Then it was gone. "The supply report," Kale said. "Not a greeting, not a thank you, just a demand." Alara slid the document toward him. "Second quarter numbers are strong. We've increased efficiency by 34% since implementing the new tracking system. That's $68,000 in annual savings." Kale glanced at the numbers. His jaw tightened slightly. These projections assume perfect compliance. The system has been running for 18 months without major issues. Systems fail. Not if they're maintained properly. His eyes snapped to hers, cold. "I can read a report, Alara. I don't need you to explain every detail like I'm incompetent." The accusation hit like frost spreading across glass. Kale had gotten very good at making criticism sound reasonable, professional, like he was simply maintaining standards rather than cutting her down inch by inch. Alara's fingers curled slightly against her palm. "I wasn't implying—" "Then stop hovering." The door opened again. Alpha Aldrich strode in his presence, filling the room the way a true alphas always did. Behind him came 3 council members, their conversation dying the moment they noticed the tension between Kyle and Alara. Aldrich's gaze moved between them, sharp, assessing. "Are we interrupting something?" "No, Father," Kale said smoothly. Alara was just delivering the reports. The way he said her name, like an afterthought, like she was staff rather than his future Luna. Aldrich frowned but said nothing. The council members took their seats. Alara moved to her usual position beside Magnus, and the meeting began. She'd been attending these councils for 3 years. Before that, she'd spent 6 years working her way up from junior administrative assistant to Magnus's right hand. 9 years total of making herself indispensable. 9 years of becoming the person Catel needed, whether he realized it or not. The thought brought her back as it always did to the beginning. 9 years ago. The funeral had been small, quick, because her parents hadn't been warriors who died in glorious combat. They'd been scouts caught in the wrong place when a rogue pack decided to test Iron Ridge's borders at 2:47 in the morning. Alara had stood beside the two graves, 17 years old and suddenly alone in a way that made her bones ache. The pack had gathered out of respect, but they'd kept their distance. Grief was private. The pack would support her, but they wouldn't intrude. She'd been grateful for that, the space to break apart without witnesses. Then someone had approached. "You're Alara Wright." She'd turned to find Kale standing beside her, 20 years old then, already filling out into the build of a future alpha. Most wolves his age looked at him with admiration or fear, but that day his expression had been something else entirely. Gentle. "I'm sorry about your parents," he'd said quietly. Alara had nodded because words wouldn't come. Kale had hesitated, then placed a hand on her shoulder. The touch had been brief, careful, like he understood that too much kindness might shatter her completely. "They were brave wolves," he'd told her, "and this pack takes care of its own. You're not alone here, Alara." Simple words, but in that moment they'd been everything. She'd fallen in love right then, standing beside her parents' graves with the smell of turned earth in the air and Kyle Ironwood's hand warm against her shoulder. She'd spent every day since trying to become someone worthy of standing beside him. The council meeting dragged on. Resource allocation, border patrol adjustments, a dispute between two warrior families over training schedule priority. Alara made notes, tracked action items, watched Kyle dismiss 3 separate suggestions from council members with the kind of casual arrogance that made grown wolves flinch. He'd always been confident. Even at 20, he'd carried himself like someone who knew his destiny was written in stone. But somewhere in the past few years, confidence had curdled into something harder, colder. Or maybe it had always been there and Alara had simply refused to see it. "The eastern border needs reinforcement," Magnus was saying. "We've had 2 rogue sightings in the past month. Increased patrols," Kale said. 6 additional warriors rotating shifts. "That will stretch our coverage on the western sector." "Then pull from reserve training," Magnus frowned. "With respect, that leaves us vulnerable if—" "Are you questioning my judgment, Beta?" The room went still. Magnus held Kyle's gaze for a long moment. Then carefully, "I'm offering tactical analysis. That's my job. Your job is to support pack leadership, not second-guess it." Aldrich cleared his throat. "Kale." The single word carried weight, a reminder that while Kale might be alpha heir, he wasn't alpha yet. Kale's jaw worked. Then he nodded once sharply. "Fine. What do you suggest, Magnus?" The meeting continued, but the damage was done. Alara watched council members exchange glances, watched Magnus's expression settle into something carefully neutral, watched Kale lean back in his chair with the satisfied look of someone who'd just proven a point. When the council finally adjourned 2 hours later, Alara gathered the documents while the others filed out. Kale stood by the window looking out over the territory with his arms crossed. She hesitated, then approached. "The eastern border suggestion," she said quietly. "I could run projections on different deployment scenarios, find an option that maintains coverage without pulling from reserves." Kale didn't turn around. "You don't need to manage every detail, Alara." "I'm not managing, I'm offering to help." "I don't need help." The dismissal hung between them. Not angry, just final, like she was a problem he'd learned to work around rather than a partner he valued. Alara's fingers tightened on the edge of the document folder. "Kyle." Finally, he looked at her. His expression was perfectly blank, the face he showed to pack members he didn't particularly care about. What? She wanted to ask why. Why he looked at her like she was invisible. Why 3 years of engagement hadn't softened him even slightly. Why the man who'd comforted a grieving 17-year-old girl had turned into someone who couldn't spare her a single kind word. Instead, she said nothing. "I'll have those projections ready by tomorrow." Kale turned back to the window. "Fine." Alara left. The hallway outside was empty. She stood there for a moment, documents clutched against her chest, breathing carefully. 1,096 mornings now. She wondered how many more it would take. That afternoon, Alara worked through lunch. The eastern border deployment scenarios took 3 hours to model properly. Different warrior configurations, shift rotations, supply chain adjustments. The kind of detailed analysis that Magnus appreciated and Kyle would likely glance at for 30 seconds before making whatever decision he'd already decided on. She finished the 5th scenario and sat back rubbing her temples. The office was quiet. Most pack members were either training or handling afternoon patrols. Through the window, she could see the courtyard where young wolves practiced combat forms, their movements sharp and synchronized. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." The door opened. A young Omega named Lily entered, carrying a basket covered with cloth. She smiled brightly, the kind of smile that suggested she didn't yet understand how pack politics actually worked. Magnus asked me to bring you lunch. Said you'd forget to eat otherwise. Alara accepted the basket with genuine gratitude. Thank you. Lily didn't leave immediately. Instead, she lingered by the door, curiosity bright in her eyes. Is it true you're going to be Luna? The question dropped like a stone into still water. That's the plan, Alara said carefully. You must be so excited. Alara looked down at the basket. Inside, fresh bread, cheese, dried meat. Magnus knew her favorites. I'm honored by the Alpha's trust, she said, the diplomatic answer. The safe one. Lily's smile dimmed slightly, like she'd expected something different. More enthusiasm, maybe? The breathless joy of a woman about to mate with the pack's heir. But Alara had learned years ago that enthusiasm only made the disappointment sharper when it wasn't returned. Well, Lily said eventually, congratulations anyway. KL's lucky to have someone like you. She left before Alara could figure out how to respond to that. Lucky. Alara unwrapped the bread and took a bite, chewed mechanically. Wondered if Kato had ever even once felt lucky to have her. Evening arrived with the kind of brutal cold that made wolves grateful for their fur. Alara finished the deployment scenarios, compiled them into a clean report, and left it on Magnus's desk for morning review. The pack house was quieter now. Most members had retreated to their homes for dinner. She could hear distant laughter from the communal dining hall, the warm sounds of pack bonds that didn't include her. Alara had stopped attending pack dinners about a year ago. Too many pitying looks, too many carefully neutral questions about when the mating ceremony would finally happen. Too many moments of watching Kyle laugh and joke with everyone except her. She climbed the stairs to her small quarters in the pack house's east wing. Modest rooms but comfortable. A bed, a desk, bookshelves lined with texts on pack management and territorial law. Everything she'd studied to become a better Luna. Alara changed out of her work clothes, washed her face, stared at her reflection in the small mirror. 26 years old, light brown hair that she kept practical rather than pretty. Gray eyes that had learned to hide disappointment. A face that was pleasant enough but not the kind that made males stop and stare. Not like Celine Rivers. The thought appeared unbidden. Unwelcome. Celine had arrived 6 months ago, introduced as a childhood friend of KL's, visiting from a neighboring pack. Beautiful in the effortless way that made other females feel inadequate. Charming, warm. The kind of wolf who could walk into a room and immediately become its center. Everything Alara had never been. The pack had loved her instantly. Even Aldrich had seemed charmed by her easy laughter and quick wit. And Kyle, Alara turned away from the mirror. Tried not to think about the way KL smiled when Celine entered a room. Like someone had lit a candle inside him. The way he'd never once smiled at Alara. A knock on her door startled her from thoughts that had nowhere productive to go. Come in. Magnus entered holding a sealed envelope. His expression was carefully neutral, which meant whatever was in that envelope was going to complicate her life. Inter-pack meeting, he said without preamble. 3 days from now, Silvercrest Pack requested a summit to discuss the shared forest territory along our eastern border. Alara straightened. The 145-acre disputed zone. That's the one. Alpha Aldrich wants you to handle the negotiation. Something warm flickered in her chest. Recognition. Trust. The validation she'd been working toward for 9 years. I'll prepare a proposal, she said. What are our priorities? Maintain current access while avoiding escalation. Silvercrest's new Alpha is... Magnus paused, choosing words carefully. Reasonable but firm. Don't mistake diplomacy for weakness. Usah, Theron Ashcroft. Magnus raised an eyebrow. You've done your research. I always do. He smiled slightly. Then the smile faded. Kale will be attending as well. As Alpha heir. The warmth dimmed. Of course. Magnus studied her with those two perceptive eyes. This is an opportunity, Alara, for the pack to see what you're capable of. What you've always been capable of. I know. I'm not sure you do. He moved closer, his voice dropping. You've spent 9 years trying to earn something from someone who refuses to see your value. Maybe it's time to let the rest of the pack and yourself remember what you're worth. Alara looked down at her hands, steady, competent. The hands that held Iron Ridge Pack together in ways most wolves never noticed. I'll prepare the proposal, she said again. Magnus sighed, but he didn't push further. He simply placed the envelope on her desk and left. Alara opened it. Inside, formal summit details, territorial maps, Silvercrest Pack's preliminary position. She spread the documents across her desk and began to work. Outside, the moon rose over Iron Ridge territory, full and bright and indifferent to the small dramas of wolves who thought they could control their destinies through sheer force of will. Alara worked until midnight, then until 2 in the morning. By the time she finally collapsed into bed, she had a proposal that would satisfy both packs while protecting Iron Ridge's interests. She fell asleep believing that competence mattered more than chemistry, that respect could eventually become love, that if she just worked hard enough, KL would finally see her. She was wrong about all of it, but she wouldn't realize that until 3 days later when she met a silver-eyed alpha who looked at her like she was already exactly enough. The summit hall stood on neutral ground 3 miles from Iron Ridge's eastern border. Stone walls thick enough to withstand siege. High windows that let in mountain light but kept out the wind. A place built for diplomacy when diplomacy was the only alternative to war. Ilara arrived 2 hours early. She arranged documents at the head of the table. Territorial maps marked with colored pins red for Iron Ridge patrol routes, blue for Silvercrest, green for the disputed 145-acre forest zone. Supply manifests, historical access records going back 20 years. Every data point that might support Iron Ridge's position. Magnus appeared in the doorway, arms full of additional files. You couldn't sleep either. Ilara accepted half the stack. Wanted to review the hunting yield statistics one more time. The numbers haven't changed since you checked them at 4 this morning. She didn't ask how he knew she'd been awake at 4. Magnus always knew. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that came from years of partnership. By the time they finished the negotiation, Space looked professional, prepared. Like Iron Ridge Pack had its affairs in perfect order, which they did largely because Ilara made sure of it. Nervous, Magnus asked. No. She straightened a document that didn't need straightening. Yes, maybe. Theron Ashcroft isn't coming here to start a war. Silvercrest has been peaceful under his leadership, which means he's either genuinely diplomatic or very good at hiding his intentions. Magnus smiled. Now you sound like a Luna. The phrase settled over her like a coat that almost fit. Not quite comfortable, but close enough that she could imagine wearing it properly someday. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Alpha Aldrich entered first, his presence commanding without effort. Behind him came Kael, dressed in formal pack attire that made him look every inch the heir apparent. And behind Kael, like a shadow that had learned to smile, came Celine Rivers. Ilara's stomach tightened. Celine, Aldrich said, his tone measured. This is a formal negotiation. Are you certain you wish to attend? Celine's hand rested lightly on Kael's arm, possessive without being obvious. I'd like to observe if that's acceptable. Pack diplomacy fascinates me. Kael looked at his father. I see no issue with it. Aldrich's gaze flicked to Ilara, a question in his eyes. She kept her expression neutral, and after a moment the Alpha nodded. Very well, but observers remained silent. Celine smiled sweetly. Of course, Alpha. She took a seat in the back row, arranging her skirts with deliberate care. When she caught Ilara watching, her smile widened just slightly. A private victory. Small, but sharp. Ilara turned back to the maps, focused on the negotiation ahead, on the work that mattered more than whatever game Celine was playing. The main doors opened, and Theron Ashcroft walked in. He was taller than Ilara expected, broader too, with the kind of build that came from years of fighting rather than just training. Dark hair shot through with silver at the temples. Eyes the color of storm clouds, gray that could shift from calm to dangerous in a heartbeat. Behind him walked a lean male with sharp features and an armful of books. Beta, Ilara guessed, the intellectual type who preferred strategy to combat. Theron's gaze swept the room, cataloging exits and threats with the efficiency of someone who'd survived situations where those details mattered. When his eyes landed on Ilara, they paused, studied her with an intensity that made her spine straighten involuntarily. Then he smiled. Slight, genuine. Alpha Aldrich. Theron crossed the room with measured steps. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Alpha Theron, Aldrich clasped his forearm in the traditional greeting. May this negotiation strengthen bonds between our packs. That's the intention. Theron turned to Magnus. Beta Holt, your reputation precedes you. As does yours, Alpha. Magnus gestured to the table. We've prepared materials for review. Thorough as expected. But Theron wasn't looking at the documents. His attention had returned to Ilara. And you are Ilara Grayson, she said, Beta assistant. I'll be handling the negotiation details. Something shifted in Theron's expression. Interest, maybe, or recognition of competence when he saw it. Declan Frost, the male behind him said, nodding politely. Silvercrest Beta, I look forward to working with you. They took their seats across from each other, Iron Ridge on one side, Silvercrest on the other, neutral ground in the most literal sense. Ilara laid out the first map. The disputed territory comprises 145 acres of mixed forest. Iron Ridge has maintained patrol access for 23 years. In that time, we've cleared the area of rogue wolves on 16 occasions and prevented 3 separate border incursions by hostile packs. Declan consulted his notes. We don't dispute Iron Ridge's patrol record. However, the territorial boundary runs directly through the forest's eastern ridge. From a legal standpoint, approximately 60% falls within Silvercrest's technical borders. Technical borders that haven't been enforced in over 2 decades, Magnus countered, which doesn't negate their validity. The negotiation had begun. For the next hour, they traded positions like chess players trading pieces. Alara presented hunting yield data. Declan countered with historical boundary surveys. Magnus emphasized Iron Ridge's investment in security. Theron acknowledged the value while pointing out that investment didn't equal ownership. It was professional, respectful, the kind of careful diplomacy that prevented wars. And through it all, Kyle said nothing. He sat beside his father, arms crossed, expression set like stone. When Aldrich asked for his input on patrol logistics, Kale waved it off. When Magnus tried to draw him into the tactical discussion, he shrugged. The future Alpha completely disengaged from pack leadership. Alara felt Theron's gaze on her again, assessing. When she looked up, he didn't look away. "You've clearly studied this territory extensively," he said. "It's my responsibility to understand what we're negotiating. Most assistants would simply compile data. You've analyzed patterns, projected outcomes, even modeled different access scenarios." He leaned forward slightly. "How long have you been doing this work?" 9 years total, 3 as beta assistant. And before that, a junior administrator, supply chain management, whatever needed doing. Theron's lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. Whatever needed doing, that's a diplomatic way of saying you hold the pack together while others take credit. Heat crept up Alara's neck. Across the table, Kale's jaw tightened. "I serve my pack," Alara said carefully. "I can see that." Theron glanced at the maps, then back to her. "What if we approach this differently? Instead of fighting over who owns what, we focus on practical access. Shared patrol responsibility, coordinated schedules, mutual benefit from the territory's resources." Alara blinked. It was almost exactly the solution she'd modeled at 2 in the morning, but hadn't proposed yet, waiting for the right moment in the negotiation. "That could work," she said slowly, "if both packs committed to proportional patrol coverage, based on actual territorial access rather than arbitrary claims. We'd need a detailed schedule, clear protocols for incident response. Naturally, perhaps your beta could coordinate with mine to develop the framework." Magnus and Declan exchanged glances. Both nodded. "Reasonable," Magnus said. Aldrich leaned back in his chair, expression thoughtful. "Kale, your thoughts on this approach?" Kale's eyes moved from Alara to Theron, something cold flickering in their depths. "Fine," he said flatly. "Whatever gets this done faster." The dismissal was clear. Theron raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The negotiation continued for another 40 minutes. By the end, they'd outlined a framework that satisfied both packs: proportional access, shared security responsibility, quarterly reviews to assess effectiveness. It was elegant, efficient, the kind of solution that only worked when both sides entered in good faith. As the meeting concluded and documents were gathered, Theron approached Alara directly. "You negotiate well," he said quietly, not loud enough for the others to hear clearly, but not whispered either. "Better than most Alphas I've dealt with." "Thank you, Alpha Theron." Just Theron. His storm gray eyes held hers. "And I meant what I said. You're wasted in a supporting role." Alara glanced toward Kael, who was speaking with his father near the door, not looking at her, never looking at her. "I serve where I'm needed." "Do you," Theron's voice dropped lower, "or do you serve where you're taken for granted?" The observation hit like a gust of unexpected wind, ripples spreading outward, disturbing surfaces that had seemed calm. Before Alara could respond, Theron straightened, pulled a small card from his jacket pocket, and placed it on the table beside her documents. "If you ever decide you want more than competence taken for granted," he said, "Silvercrest values wolves who understand the difference between duty and being used." Then he walked away, leaving Alara staring at the card. Heavy paper Silvercrest's crest embossed in silver ink. Below it, a single line: "The door is open." Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. "What did he give you?" Kale's voice. Sharp, sudden. Alara slipped the card into her pocket. "Nothing, just a formality." Didn't look like nothing. Kale stepped closer, his presence aggressive. "What did he say to you?" "He complimented the negotiation." "He was looking at you like—" Kale stopped himself, jaw working. "Just stay away from him." The hypocrisy would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. 3 years of treating her like an inconvenience, and now suddenly he cared who spoke to her. "Is that an order, Alpha?" The words came out sharper than she intended. Kale's eyes narrowed. "It's advice. Theron Ashcroft didn't become Alpha of Silvercrest by being nice. Whatever he wants from you, it's not innocent. Maybe he wants nothing. Maybe he was just being professional." "Professional." Kale laughed cold and short. "You really are naive." The accusation landed harder than it should have. Better naive than bitter, she said quietly. Cale opened his mouth, closed it. For a moment, something flickered across his face, surprise. Maybe that she'd pushed back at all. Then Celine appeared at his elbow, her hand sliding possessively around his arm. Cale, your father is ready to leave. He looked at Celine, looked back at Alara. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Celine lingered for just a moment, her smile sharp as broken glass. You handled the negotiation beautifully, she said, voice honey sweet. For a beta assistant. She followed Cale before Alara could respond. Magnus appeared beside her, his expression carefully neutral. Don't, Alara said. I wasn't going to say anything. Good. They gathered the remaining documents in silence. Through the tall windows, Alara watched the Silvercrest wolves preparing to leave. Theron stood by his vehicle speaking with Declan. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met across the distance. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just held her gaze for 3 seconds that felt like a declaration of something neither of them could name yet. Then he climbed into the vehicle and drove away. Alara touched the card in her pocket, felt its weight, its possibility. The door is open. She wondered what it would feel like to walk through it. The next 6 months passed like water wearing down stone. Subtle, inevitable. Each day chipping away pieces of foundation until the whole structure was weaker than it looked. Celine's visits became permanent. No announcement, no formal invitation. She simply stopped leaving, and Kyle stopped suggesting she should. A room was prepared in the pack house. Her belongings appeared in closets and on shelves. Within 2 weeks, she'd integrated herself so thoroughly into Iron Ridge's daily life that questioning her presence felt churlish. The pack loved her. Young wolves sought her advice on everything from combat techniques to relationship drama. Warriors laughed at her jokes during training breaks. Even the elders smiled when she brought them tea and asked about their health. She was everything a Luna should be. Warm, accessible, beloved. Everything Alara had tried to be for 9 years and failed. The manipulations started small. A misplaced report that Celine claimed to have been organizing. Supply requisitions that went missing only to be found torn and scattered in Alara's office. Small comments dropped in casual conversation. Oh, did Alara forget to mention that? Or, I thought you would have handled this differently, but I'm sure Alara knows what she's doing. Each incident too minor to prove. Too subtle to call out without looking paranoid. But they accumulated, like water drops eventually carving through stone. The incident with the ledger happened on a Tuesday. Alara had spent 4 hours compiling trade records for Alpha Aldrich's quarterly review. Details on every exchange with neighboring packs, quantities, values terms. The kind of documentation that proved Iron Ridge was a reliable partner. She left the ledger on the council table for 5 minutes, just long enough to retrieve additional supporting documents from Magnus's office. When she returned, the ledger was on the floor, pages scattered across stone like wounded birds. Celine stood nearby, hand pressed to her mouth in distress. Oh dear, she said softly. I tried to tidy the table and must have knocked it over. I'm so sorry, Alara. Alara knelt to gather the papers. They were out of order now, would need to be reorganized. An hour of work minimum. It's fine, she said, keeping her voice level. I feel terrible. You work so hard on these things. Really, it's fine. But Celine was already helping gathering pages with exaggerated care, making a show of her concern. When Kyle entered the room moments later, he found Celine on her knees helping clean up the mess and Alara standing with the disheveled ledger clutched against her chest. What happened? My fault entirely, Celine said before Alara could speak. I was trying to help organize things and made a mess instead. Kyle's gaze moved to Alara. You left important documents unattended. I was gone for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is enough for things to go wrong. He turned to Celine. It's fine. You were trying to help. To Alara. Be more careful with pack records. He left without waiting for a response. Celine remained kneeling, gathering the last scattered pages. When she looked up at Alara, her expression was pure sympathy. But her eyes held something else entirely. Satisfaction. The tea incident came 3 weeks later. Council meeting. Important one discussion of trade terms with a pack from the Northern Territories. Alara had prepared tea service as she always did. Nothing fancy, just efficiency and hospitality. She carried the tray through the hallway, careful not to spill. The teacups were porcelain old, but sturdy, part of a set that had belonged to Aldrich's mother. Celine appeared from a side corridor. Oh, let me help. She reached for the tray. I've got it. Celine's hand bumped Alara's arm. Just a touch, barely noticeable. The tray tilted. One teacup slid toward the edge. Alara caught it, but not before a single drop splashed onto Celine's sleeve. Celine gasped. Dramatic. Injured. Oh no. I'm sorry, Alara said automatically. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. But Celine's voice carried, loud enough that KL, approaching from the council room, heard everything. What happened? Nothing, Alara said quickly. Just a small spill. The tray shifted, Celine explained, examining her sleeve with exaggerated concern. I probably shouldn't have reached for it. This is my fault. But the way she said it, the tone, the delivery made it clear whose fault she really thought it was. Kale's eyes moved between them, landed on Alara with cold assessment. You need to be more careful. It was an accident. She reached for the tray. So now you're blaming Celine for trying to help. The words struck like ice. Alara's fingers tightened on the tray handle. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm explaining what happened. You're making excuses. Kale stepped closer, voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Celine has done nothing but try to integrate herself into this pack. The least you could do is show some gratitude instead of acting jealous every time she's around. Jealous. The word burned. I'm not. This engagement was never my choice. Kale continued, each word precise and cutting. My father forced it. The only reason you're still here is obligation. If you can't even manage basic hospitality without causing drama, maybe you should reconsider whether you're actually fit to be Luna. Alara stood very still. The teacups rattled slightly on the tray. Her hands were shaking. She willed them to stop. They didn't. Kale walked away. Celine remained, her expression carefully sympathetic. But when she caught Alara's eye, she smiled. Small, private, victorious. After that, Alara stopped defending herself. What was the point? Kale had decided what he believed. Every explanation sounded like an excuse. Every attempt to clarify the truth only made her look more desperate. So she stopped trying. She worked. She organized. She held the pack together with the same quiet efficiency she'd always used. And she watched Kale fall deeper under Celine's influence with every passing day. They weren't subtle about it. The touches that lingered too long. The private jokes no one else understood. The way Kyle smiled when Celine entered a room, the smile Alara had spent 9 years trying to earn. Magnus noticed. She could see it in the way he watched her during council meetings, concern etched deep in the lines around his eyes. But he said nothing. Because what could he say that would change anything? 1,637 days now. 4.5 years since that moment at her parents' funeral. 3 years since the engagement announcement. How many more days would it take before Kale finally saw her? Or before she accepted that he never would? The breaking point arrived on a Thursday night in late autumn. Alara had worked late finishing reports that didn't need to be finished until morning. But the pack house was quieter at night, easier to think without voices and footsteps and the constant reminder that she existed on the periphery of her own life. At 11:30, she gathered a final stack of documents for Kyle's review. Supply projections for winter. Routine. But he preferred reviewing them before bed, and she'd learned long ago that meeting his preferences, however small, was the only way to earn even a moment of acknowledgement. The walk to his study felt longer than usual. The hallway stretched out like a metaphor for the distance between them. She knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. He probably had earbuds in, or was too focused on whatever he was reading to hear. It happens sometimes. Alara turned the handle, pushed the door open. Kyle, I have the winter supply. The words died. Kale wasn't alone. Celine was in his arms, his mouth on hers, her hands tangled in his hair. The kind of desperate, passionate kiss that spoke of familiarity, of practice, of something that had been building for far longer than 6 months. The tray slipped from Alara's hands. Porcelain shattered against stone. The sound exploded through the study like a gunshot. Kale and Celine jerked apart. For one frozen moment, all three of them simply stared. Then Celine moved. She rushed toward Alara, concern painted across her features like a mask. Oh, Alara, I'm so sorry you had to see. Don't. Alara's voice came out steadier than she felt. Don't pretend you're sorry. Celine stopped. Something flickered behind her eyes. Then she leaned close enough that only Alara could hear the whispered words. You'll never win against me. Kale loves me. That Luna position you've been chasing for 9 years. Her smile turned sharp as broken glass. It's mine. It was always going to be mine. Before Alara could respond, before she could process the admission, Celine grabbed her wrist and slammed Alara's palm into her own face. The impact made a sickening sound. Celine staggered backward, hand flying to her cheek. A red mark bloomed instantly, the perfect angle, the perfect pressure to look exactly like Alara had struck her. I'm sorry, Celine cried, tears springing to her eyes with practiced ease. I didn't mean to upset you. I know you already hate me, but please, I didn't touch you. Alara stared at her own hand, still tingling from the impact. You hit her. Kale's voice cut through the room like ice. Alara turned, found him standing behind his desk, face carved in stone, absolute certainty in his expression. I didn't. She grabbed my hand and, so now you're lying too. The accusation hit harder than Celine's staged slap. KL, please? She grabbed my wrist and slammed my hand into her own face. I swear. Enough. He moved around the desk, each step deliberate, controlled fury radiating from his frame. For 3 years, you've been jealous of her. For 3 years, you've made it clear you can't stand seeing me happy with anyone else. That's not, and now you've resorted to violence. Celine sobbed quietly behind her. The perfect victim, the innocent woman attacked by a jealous future Luna who couldn't accept reality. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. I didn't hit her. She did it herself. She grabbed my hand. Stop. Kale stepped closer, close enough that she could see the disgust in his eyes. Do you have any idea how pathetic this sounds, claiming she somehow made you hit her? That's your defense. It's the truth. The truth is you've been looking for an excuse to attack her for months. The tea incident, the ledger, every time she tries to help you find a way to make her the villain. Because she is. The slap came without warning. Kale's palm connected with Alara's cheek. The sound cracked through the study like lightning. Her head snapped to the side, ears ringing, cheek burning. For a moment, the world went silent. Then Kale's voice cut through the ringing. Maybe that will teach you to stop acting like an attention-seeking nuisance. Alara slowly lifted her hand to her face. Her cheek throbbed, warm, swelling already. I never wanted this engagement. Kyle continued, each word dropping like stones into deep water. My father forced it on me. You've known that from the beginning. The only reason you're still here is because I'm too dutiful to embarrass my father by rejecting you publicly. He leaned closer, his voice dropped to something cruel and intimate. But if it weren't for him, I would have rejected you years ago. You're not Luna material, Alara. You're a competent assistant. That's all you've ever been. That's all you'll ever be. A fracture split through her chest, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet crack in a foundation that had been weakening for 4.5 years. I wish you would just disappear, Kale finished. Make everyone's lives easier. Behind him, Celine watched with barely concealed triumph. And in that moment, Ilara finally understood. She'd spent 9 years building herself into someone worthy of love. But you couldn't earn love through competence. You couldn't negotiate affection through efficiency. Either someone saw your worth or they didn't. Kale had never seen hers, and he never would. The realization settled over her like snow, cold, final, peaceful in its certainty. She stepped forward. Kale frowned, confused by the sudden movement. Ilara looked him in the eye. Then she turned to Celine and slapped her, hard, across the same cheek that bore the fake mark. Celine gasped, stumbling backward. Real pain this time. Real shock. The room went absolutely still. If you're going to accuse me of hitting her, Ilara said, her voice perfectly calm, I might as well make it true. Kale stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're insane. No, I'm done. She straightened her shoulders, met his gaze without flinching. You wished I would disappear. Careful what you wish for, Kale. She turned and walked to the door. Where are you going? Does it matter? She looked back one last time. You said it yourself. You never wanted me here. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and Ilara Grayson walked away from the only home she'd ever known. The night air hit like a physical blow. Ilara moved through the pack house on autopilot, feet carrying her toward her quarters, while her mind struggled to process what had just happened. The hallway stretched endlessly, 47 steps from Kyle's study to her door. She'd counted them once years ago, back when she still believed proximity mattered. Inside her room, everything looked exactly as she'd left it that morning. Bed neatly made, desk organized with color-coded files, bookshelves lined with texts on pack management and territorial law. The accumulated evidence of 9 years spent building toward a future that had just shattered. Her cheeks still burned where Kyle had struck her. Ilara moved to the small mirror above her dresser. The mark was already visible, red handprint stark against pale skin. By morning it would bruise. Purple and yellow proof of the moment everything changed. She touched it gently, felt the heat, the ache, and something inside her went very, very quiet. Not calm, not peaceful, just empty. Like a house after everyone had moved out, leaving nothing but echoes and dust. Ilara pulled her travel bag from the closet, canvas, weatherproof, designed for scouts on extended patrol. She'd never used it, never needed it. Her entire life had existed within a 3-mile radius for as long as she could remember. She packed with mechanical efficiency. Clothes, 3 changes, dark colors, a spare pair of boots, winter jacket, personal documents. the small leather journal where she tracked administrative improvements. Finally, money. $847 in cash. The bag weighed 14 pounds when she finished. Everything she owned that actually mattered. 9 years reduced to canvas and practicality. Alara sat on the edge of her bed and pulled out a piece of paper, wrote carefully, her hand steadier than it had any right to be. Alpha Aldrich, your mom, I apologize for abandoning the engagement you arranged. You have always treated me with fairness and kindness, and I regret that my departure will break the trust you placed in me. Iron Ridge Pack gave me a home when I needed one most. For that I will always be grateful. But I no longer believe I can fulfill the role you hoped I would. Please forgive me. Alara Grayson. A second letter, shorter. Magnus. Thank you for everything. You were the father I needed when I'd lost my own. E. She folded both letters carefully and slipped them into her jacket pocket. One more thing. From her desk drawer, a small wooden box. Inside, a silver bracelet. Her mother's. The only thing she'd kept after her parents died. She'd planned to wear it at her mating ceremony. Now she clasped it around her wrist, a reminder that she'd survived losing her parents, and she'd survive losing this too. The clock read 1:17 a.m. Time to go. The pack house was silent as Alara moved through darkened hallways. Most wolves were asleep. The few on night patrol would be at the borders, not watching internal corridors. She made it to the main floor without seeing anyone. Then voices drifted from Magnus's office. Light spilled under the door. Alara hesitated. She could knock. Explain. Say goodbye properly. But if she looked into Magnus's eyes, if she saw the disappointment or concern, or worse, the understanding, she might not be able to leave. And she had to leave. Better a clean break. Alara slipped the letter under Magnus's door and kept walking. The night air outside was sharp and cold, carrying the promise of winter. Stars scattered across black sky. The moon hung full and bright, the kind of night made for running. She shifted before she reached the tree line. Bones cracked and reformed. Skin gave way to fur light brown, unremarkable, the color of shadows in dry grass. Her wolf had never been particularly impressive. Not large, not striking, just functional. Just enough. 4 paws hit packed earth and Alara ran. She ran the way drowning people break for surface, desperate, urgent, driven by instinct older than thought. The forest blurred around her. Trees became dark streaks. The ground disappeared beneath her paws. Behind her, Iron Ridge Pack. Everything she'd known. Everyone she'd tried to be. Ahead, nothing. Uncertainty. The terrifying possibility of starting over. Her wolf didn't care about uncertainty. It only knew how to run. So Alara ran. She didn't know how long she'd been running when the other wolf appeared. One moment the forest was empty. The next, a massive silver shape materialized from the darkness, blocking her path. Alara skidded to a halt, claws digging furrows in dirt. Her hackles raised instinctively. The silver wolf was enormous, easily twice her size, with a coat that seemed to absorb moonlight and reflect it back stronger. Alpha. Dominance rolled off him in waves, undeniable, absolute. Alara lowered her body, bared her teeth in defensive warning. She was trespassing, she knew that. Iron Ridge territory ended 3 miles back. This was neutral forest technically, but close enough to Silvercrest's borders that an alpha had every right to challenge her. The silver wolf tilted its head, studied her with eyes the color of storm clouds. Then it shifted. The transformation was smooth, controlled, like watching water pour into a new shape. Seconds later, Theron Ashcroft stood where the wolf had been. He was bare-chested, wearing only the loose pants most wolves kept tied around their ankles for post-shift modesty. Moonlight carved shadows across muscle and old scars, the map of a life spent fighting. Well, he said calmly, as if encountering a distraught she-wolf in the middle of the forest at 2 a.m. was perfectly normal. That answers my question about whether you'd come. Alara stared at him. Her wolf form didn't allow for speech, but her confusion must have been obvious. Theron crossed his arms, leaning against a tree with deliberate casualness. I've been patrolling this section of forest every night for the past month. Just in case. He'd been waiting for her. The realization hit like vertigo. You can shift if you want, Theron continued, or stay as you are. But you should probably decide soon because you're shaking. Alara hadn't noticed, but he was right. Her wolf form trembled, exhaustion and emotional shock finally catching up with adrenaline. She shifted. The transformation back to human was slower, harder. Her body felt heavy. Wrong. When she stood on 2 legs again, the night air bit through her thin shirt and jeans. Theron shrugged out of his jacket. Apparently, he'd left one nearby before shifting and held it out. Alara took it automatically. The fabric was warm, lined with fleece. It smelled like pine and something darker. Older. The scent of an alpha who'd earned his position through combat rather than inheritance. How did you know? Her voice came out rough, raw. That you'd leave Iron Ridge, she nodded. I didn't. Not for certain. Theron's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes held weight. But I watched Cale Ironwood dismiss you repeatedly during that negotiation. Watched you take it without flinching. And I thought this is a wolf who's spent too long being told her competence doesn't matter. He stepped closer, not threatening, just present. Either you'd wake up eventually and realize you deserved better, or you'd break under the weight of being invisible. I hoped it would be the former. I'm not sure waking up is the right word. Alara's hand drifted to her cheek. The swelling had started. Shattering might be more accurate. Theron's gaze sharpened. He hit you. Not a question, a statement of fact delivered with the kind of cold certainty that preceded violence. It's complicated. It's not. His voice dropped to something dangerous. Complicated would be a disagreement about pack policy. What you're describing is a male who struck his future mate. That's simple and unforgivable. Tears threatened. Alara blinked them back furiously. She'd cried enough tonight. Theron seemed to sense the struggle. His expression gentled slightly. Come on, he said. Let's get you somewhere warm. I don't, Alara stopped, started again. I don't have anywhere to go. Yes, you do. Theron's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I told you 6 months ago the door is open. That offer hasn't expired. You don't even know what happened tonight. Don't I? He met her gaze steadily. You finally had enough of being treated like you're disposable. You chose yourself for once, instead of waiting for someone else to choose you. And now you're standing in the middle of neutral forest at 2 in the morning, questioning whether you made the right decision. Every word landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Did I, Alara asked quietly, make the right decision? Theron considered her for a long moment. Then he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and wiped a tear from her cheek she hadn't realized had fallen. You left a place that made you cry, he said. You walked toward uncertainty instead of staying in misery. That's not just the right decision. It's the brave one. His thumb brushed once more across her cheekbone, gentle despite the calluses. Let's go home, Alara. Home. The word shouldn't have meant anything yet, but the way he said it, steady, certain, like a promise, already kept made something in her chest loosen. She nodded. Together they walked towards Silvercrest territory. Dawn broke over mountains that looked the same as the ones around Iron Ridge, but somehow felt different. The air tasted cleaner. The light fell softer. Or maybe that was just Alara's desperate mind trying to convince her she'd made the right choice. Silvercrest Pack's settlement appeared gradually through morning mist. Wooden structures built to complement the forest rather than dominate it. Smaller than Iron Ridge, but there was a warmth to the architecture, like someone had actually thought about wolves living here rather than just defending territory. Theron led her down the main path. A few early risers were already moving between buildings. They stopped when they saw their alpha approaching with a strange female. Curious looks, but not hostile. Everyone, Theron's voice carried easily across the small clearing. This is Alara Grayson. She's joining Silvercrest Pack today. Murmurs rippled through the gathered wolves. She'll be working with Beta Declan as his assistant. Theron paused, then added with quiet emphasis, and she has the potential to become one of this pack's greatest assets. Heat crept up Alara's neck. That's an exaggeration. No, Theron looked at her directly. It isn't. More wolves had emerged, now drawn by the commotion. An older female stepped forward, her expression kind. Welcome to Silvercrest. I'm Mira, head of household management. If you need anything, quarter supplies orientation, find me. Thank you, Alara managed. Others called out greetings, offered help. The warmth was unexpected. At Iron Ridge, new pack members faced weeks of proving themselves before being truly accepted. Here they were welcoming her based on nothing but Theron's word, because they trusted their alpha's judgment. Come on, Theron gestured toward a larger building. Let's get you settled. The quarters Mira showed her were modest but comfortable. Single room larger than what she'd had at Iron Ridge. A real bed. Windows that opened. A desk positioned to catch morning light. Bathroom is shared with 3 other wolves on this floor, Mira explained, but the schedule usually works out fine. Alara set her 14-pound bag on the bed. I know it's not much, Mira said gently, but it's yours. Nobody will enter without permission. Nobody will question your right to be here. The promise hit harder than it should have. Thank you, Alara said and meant it. After Mira left, Alara stood in the center of her new room and tried to feel something other than numb. She'd done it, actually left. She should feel relieved, liberated. Instead, she just felt hollow. A knock interrupted her spiral. It's Declan, a male voice called. Theron said you might be ready to talk shop, or I can come back later if you need space. Alara crossed to the door, opened it. Silvercrest Beta stood in the hallway, arms full of files and looking slightly sheepish. He was lean and sharp-featured, with intelligence burning in his dark eyes. Sorry to ambush you on your first day, he said, but I'm genuinely drowning in administrative chaos, and Theron promised you were the solution to all my organizational nightmares. Despite everything, Alara felt her lips twitch. He oversold my abilities. Did he? Declan shifted the files. Because right now I have 6 different filing systems that don't talk to each other, a supply chain tracking method from 1987, and a patrol schedule that would make a cryptographer weep. If you can fix even one of those things, you're already worth your weight in gold. The challenge in his words wasn't hostile, just honest. I could take a look, Alara heard herself say. Declan's grin was immediate and genuine. You're hired. Come on, let me show you the disaster you've inherited. The administrative office looked like a tornado had fought a filing cabinet, and both lost. Papers covered every surface. Binders stacked in precarious towers. A whiteboard covered in notes that contradicted each other. Alara stood in the doorway and felt something shift in her chest. Purpose. This was a problem she could solve. Where are your priority files, she asked. Define priority. Anything time-sensitive. Trade agreements with deadlines. Patrol reports from the last week. Declan blinked. Then he started pulling files from different piles, and Alara realized he actually knew where things were. The chaos had a logic to it, just not one anyone else could follow. Okay, she said, here's what we're going to do. 2 hours later, they'd created a basic triage system. Critical files in red folders on the left. Important but not urgent in blue folders in the center. Reference materials in green on the right. Simple, visual, functional. Declan stared at the organized desk like it was a miracle. How did you do that? Pattern recognition. Everything has a natural order. You just have to find it. He set a corrected report aside and looked at her directly. Theron said you came from Iron Ridge. Ilara's hand stilled. I did. May I ask why you left? The question was careful, respectful. Alara considered lying. Then she told him the truth. All of it. The engagement, the years of being dismissed, Celine's manipulations, the stage slap, Kale's real one. Declan listened without interrupting. When she finished, his expression had gone very still. I see, he said quietly. That explains several things. Like what? Like why Theron's been patrolling the border between our territories every night for a month. Declan's voice carried an edge now. He doesn't usually involve himself in individual pack member recruitment, but he made an exception for you. I don't understand why. Don't you? Declan stood crossed to the window. During that negotiation 6 months ago, Theron watched you handle complex territorial discussions with more skill than most alphas possess. Then he watched your supposed mate dismiss every word you said. He turned back. Theron values competence. But more than that, he values wolves who've been underestimated. Most of our pack members came here because they didn't fit the traditional mold. Warriors who preferred strategy to combat. Healers who questioned old practices. Wolves who were told they'd never amount to anything. Declan's expression softened. You're not the first wolf Theron's rescued from a pack that couldn't see their worth. Before Alara could respond, raised voices drifted through the window. Both of them moved to look outside. In the courtyard below, 2 wolves sparred. A small crowd had gathered to watch, laughing and cheering. We encourage sparring, Declan explained. Keeps skills sharp without the formality of ranked challenges. Plus it builds camaraderie. Iron Ridge had scheduled training sessions, twice a week monitored by senior warriors. Sounds regimented. It was effective. Was it? Declan looked at her thoughtfully. Or was it just another way to maintain hierarchy? Alara thought about the rigid structure at Iron Ridge, the careful protocols, the way every interaction reinforced who had authority and who didn't. Maybe both, she admitted. Well, here we're more flexible. As long as you fulfill your responsibilities to the pack, how you spend your free time is your business. The concept felt foreign, liberating and unsettling in equal measure. What if I wanted to train, then find someone to teach you? Actually, a female voice interrupted, I volunteer. Alara turned. A young woman stood in the doorway, practically vibrating with energy. Bright red hair pulled into a messy bun. Green eyes that sparkled with mischief. Riven, Declan said with the tone of someone who'd long ago accepted chaos as inevitable. What did you do? Nothing. Riven's smile was pure innocence. Yet, that's not reassuring. It's not meant to bonbon. She turned to Alara. You're the new beta assistant, right, Alara? Yes. Excellent. I'm Riven Thorn, head healer and professional troublemaker. I can teach you advanced combat techniques if you want. Declan frowned. You're a healer. I'm a healer who knows 17 ways to incapacitate someone without leaving permanent damage. For medical purposes. That is deeply concerning. Thank you, Riven beamed. Despite herself, Alara laughed. actually laughed. When was the last time that had happened? I appreciate the offer, she said. Maybe in a few days. Sure, no pressure. Riven turned to leave, then paused. Oh, Declan, you should let me examine that shoulder. You've been favoring your left side for 3 days. My shoulder is fine. Let me check it. Please. Declan's ears went slightly red. Fine. This afternoon? Perfect, it's the date. It's a medical examination. That's what you think. She winked at Alara. He's in denial. It's adorable. Then she was gone. Declan stood very still, visibly trying to compose himself. She's, Alara started. Exhausting, Declan finished. Brilliant, aggravating. The best healer I've ever worked with, and completely immune to professional boundaries. She likes you. She likes tormenting me. Those aren't mutually exclusive. They returned to organizing files, but Alara's mind kept circling back to what she'd just witnessed. Warmth, teasing. The easy comfort of wolves who'd built genuine bonds rather than just maintaining pack hierarchy. At Iron Ridge, pack members respected each other, worked together efficiently, but this was different. This felt like family. By midday, they'd made serious progress. Alara had created a new filing system, identified 4 critical issues, and drafted a preliminary patrol schedule. Declan looked at the schedule with something approaching awe. You did this in 90 minutes. You were working with incomplete data. Once I referenced territory coverage with warrior skill assessments and seasonal patterns, the optimal rotation became obvious. Theron was right, he said. You're wasted in a supporting role. I'm good at supporting. That's what I've always done. Being good at something doesn't mean it's all you're capable of. Before she could respond, the office door swung open. Theron entered his presence, immediately filling the small space. His eyes found Alara. How's the first morning going? She's a miracle worker, Declan said. I'm never letting her leave. Good. Theron's lips curved. That's the plan. He moved closer, studying Alara's face. His expression darkened when he saw the mark on her cheek. Has anyone looked at that? It's fine. It's evidence of assault. Theron's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. Declan, can you give us a moment? The beta nodded and slipped out. Theron turned back to Alara, reached out slowly and tilted her face toward the light. His touch was gentle, clinical, but his eyes burned with banked fury. This will bruise badly, he said quietly. You should let Riven examine it. It's just a bruise. It's a symbol of someone who claimed to care about you choosing to hurt you instead. His thumb brushed the edge of the mark, feather light. That's never just anything. Alara's throat tightened. She pulled back gently. I don't want to talk about it. All right. He accepted that without argument. What do you want to talk about? Work, organization, things I can control. Understanding flickered across his face. Fair enough. How would you feel about sitting in on a pack council meeting tomorrow? Nothing formal, just observation. I'd like that. Good. Theron moved toward the door, then paused. Alara, you're safe here, not just physically. You're allowed to exist without proving your worth every minute. You're allowed to just be. He left before she could formulate a response. Alara stood in the quiet office, surrounded by organized files and the lingering warmth of words she didn't quite know how to accept. Safe. When was the last time she'd felt safe outside Silvercrest Pack, moved through their day, laughing, training, living? And for the first time in 9 years, Alara thought maybe she could learn to live too. Not just survive, not just serve, actually live. 3 weeks could change everything. Alara discovered this gradually, then all at once. The first week at Silvercrest passed in a blur of work and adjustment. She reorganized Declan's systems, completely implemented new tracking protocols, and drafted projections that made the beta say, I could kiss you, before remembering that was inappropriate. The second week, she started training with Riven. The third week, she'd stopped counting days since leaving Iron Ridge. The number no longer mattered. What mattered was walking through Silvercrest's central square and hearing 3 different pack members greet her by name. What mattered was Declan asking her opinion and actually implementing her suggestions. What mattered was the way Theron looked at her during pack meetings, not like she was an obligation, but like she was exactly where she belonged. Small moments, but they accumulated into something larger. Worth. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Alara was reviewing patrol schedules when Declan entered, holding an envelope with Iron Ridge's official seal. Her heart stopped. It's addressed to Theron, Declan said carefully, but it mentions you. What meeting? An inter-pack summit? 4 packs, 3 days from now. Declan set the envelope down. Iron Ridge is hosting. They've requested Silvercrest's attendance. Alara stared at it. You don't have to attend. We can arrange for you to stay here. What does the letter say about me? Declan hesitated. Then Alpha Aldrich requests that if Alara Grayson is currently residing with your pack, she be permitted to attend, as well as her expertise would be valuable to the discussions. The formal phrasing couldn't hide what it really meant. Aldrich knew where she was, wanted to see her. I'll go, Alara heard herself say. You don't have to. I know, but I need to face them eventually. Might as well be on neutral ground with witnesses. Declan studied her, then nodded. I'll let Theron know. The night before the summit, Alara couldn't sleep. A knock interrupted her thoughts. It's me, Theron's voice called quietly. Are you awake? Alara opened the door. Theron stood in the hallway dressed casually. His silver-shot hair was slightly mussed. Couldn't sleep either. Wanted to check on you before tomorrow. His storm gray eyes searched her face. How are you feeling? Nervous, ready, terrified, all of it. That's reasonable. He leaned against the doorframe. Can I come in? Alara stepped back. Her room was modest, but she'd made it hers, books on the shelves, her mother's bracelet on the nightstand, a blanket Mira had given her. Small things that meant home. Theron noticed them all. You've settled in, he said. Not a question. Is that okay? It's more than okay. He turned to face her fully. Alara, I need to tell you something before tomorrow. Her stomach tightened. When you walk into that summit, you're going to face wolves who undervalued you, who dismissed your competence and took your loyalty for granted. His voice was steady, certain. I need you to understand that their inability to see your worth says everything about them and nothing about you. I know that, intellectually. But knowing and believing are different things. He stepped closer. You are one of the most capable wolves I've ever met. In 3 weeks, you've transformed Silvercrest's operations. You've earned the respect of every wolf in this pack. His eyes held hers. Tomorrow, you're walking in as Silvercrest's beta assistant, not as Cale Ironwood's rejected mate, not as someone seeking approval. You're going as my pack member with all the authority and respect that entails. The words settled over her like armor. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just remember it when things get difficult. He moved toward the door, then paused. And Alara, if anyone tries to make you feel small tomorrow, you have my permission to remind them exactly who you are now. Who am I now? Theron smiled, slight, genuine. Someone they should have valued when they had the chance. The neutral summit hall looked exactly as Alara remembered. Silvercrest arrived first. Theron led with Declan beside him. Riven had insisted on coming for moral support and possible violence, and walked on Alara's other side. They took seats on the northern side. Alara positioned herself beside Declan Files, organized posture straight, professional. The door opened. Iron Ridge Pack walked in. Alpha Aldrich entered first. Behind him came Magnus, who spotted Alara immediately. His face transformed, relief and pride mixing. Then came Cale. He looked different, thinner, harder. The confidence that had always defined him seemed brittle now. His eyes swept the room, found her, froze. For 3 heartbeats, neither moved. Alara held his gaze steadily, refusing to look away, refusing to flinch. Then Selene Rivers walked in behind him. Of course, she'd dressed carefully, playing the part of future Luna. When Selene saw Alara, her smile sharpened. Aldrich's voice cut through the tension. Alpha Theron, thank you for attending. Alpha Aldrich, Theron stood. May this summit strengthen bonds between our packs. That's the hope. Aldrich's gaze moved to Alara. Something softened. Alara, it's good to see you. Alpha, she inclined her head. You look well. I am well. The subtext was clear. I'm better without your son. Aldrich seemed to understand. A small smile touched his lips. Thank you all for attending. We've gathered to discuss coordinated border security in light of increased rogue activity. The meeting began. For the first hour, it proceeded formally. Territory reports, statistics, proposed patrol coordination. Alara provided Silvercrest data when Declan nodded, her voice steady and clear. She could feel Cale watching. Ignored it. Could feel Selene's hostile attention. Didn't care. What mattered was the work. Then Clearwater's Alpha raised a question about resource distribution, and Alara saw an inefficiency immediately. She glanced at Declan, who nodded. If I may, she said quietly. The room turned. The proposed distribution assumes equal access, but seasonal migration patterns mean the Western Quadrant will have 60% more game between November and March. If we adjust the rotation to account for that, we can reduce conflict and increase efficiency. She slid a document across one she'd prepared earlier. The Alphas studied it. Northridge's Alpha nodded. This makes sense. The math checks out. It's a good solution. Clearwater's Alpha agreed. Aldrich looked at the proposal, then at Alara. Pride flickered. Excellent work, Alara. Before she could respond, Keishel's voice cut across the table. It's overly complicated. We don't need to micromanage every detail. The room went still. Theron's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. Complicated, he said mildly, or thorough. Resource allocation doesn't require this level of analysis. It does if you want it to actually work. Declan's voice was calm, patient. Alara's proposal accounts for variables your simpler approach would miss. That's not complicated, that's competent. KL's face flushed. I wasn't. You were dismissing valid input because you don't like who it came from, Theron said quietly. That's not leadership. That's ego. The tension ratcheted up. Aldrich cleared his throat. The proposal is sound. We'll implement it. Moving on. But KL wasn't finished. He stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. Alara, stop this tantrum and... Sit down! Aldrich's voice cracked like a whip. KL froze. You will not, Aldrich continued, each word sharp, address a member of another pack with such disrespect in my presence. Is that clear? For a moment, KL looked like he might argue. Then he sat, but his eyes burned when they met Alara's. She held his gaze, calm, unaffected, and watched realization dawn. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. The meeting resumed, but the damage was done. Every alpha had just watched KL humiliate himself publicly. More importantly, they'd watched Alara refuse to be diminished by it. When the meeting adjourned, Magnus appeared at Alara's side. Walk with me. They stepped into the hallway. As soon as they were alone, Magnus pulled her into a fierce hug. I'm so proud of you. Alara's eyes burned. I'm sorry I left without saying goodbye properly. Don't you dare apologize. He pulled back. You did exactly what you needed to do. How is he? Magnus's expression darkened. Kale struggling. The pack is falling apart without you. Celine proved spectacularly incompetent as beta assistant. Lasted exactly 4 days before I had to remove her. 4 days. She misplaced critical reports, failed to track a shipment that left the kitchen without food for 2 days, and nearly caused a border incident with Northridge. Magnus shook his head. I've been handling her responsibilities on top of my own. I'm sorry. Don't be. KL created this mess. Magnus's eyes softened. But enough about Iron Ridge. Are they treating you well? Better than well. Alara smiled genuinely. I'm actually valued there, Magnus. They listen. They implement my suggestions. Theron treats me like you deserve to be treated. Yes. Good. Magnus glanced toward the hall. I should get back before Kael does something else stupid. But Alara, you'll always have a home at Iron Ridge if you need it, not with Kael. Never with him. But you're family to me. He hugged her once more, then disappeared. Alara stood alone, processing everything. She'd faced Kael. She'd held her ground. She'd shown everyone, including herself, that she was more than his rejected mate. Alara, she turned. Kael stood at the far end of the hallway, alone. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, but something made her stay. What do you want, Kael? He approached slowly, stopped about 6 feet away. You look different and... I am different. Silvercrest is treating you well. Very well. Kael's jaw worked. I didn't think you'd actually leave. You told me to disappear. I did. I didn't mean... He stopped. Things have been difficult without you. Good. The word came out flat, emotionless. Kael flinched. Lara, don't. She cut him off. Don't try to apologize. Don't try to explain. And definitely don't try to ask me to come back. I wasn't... Yes, you were. Alara stepped closer and Kael actually backed up. You've realized that I held Iron Ridge together, that without me, things fall apart. That maybe I was worth more than you gave me credit for. She held his gaze. But here's what you need to understand. I don't care anymore. Your pack's struggles are not my problem. Your regret is not my concern. You made your choice when you slapped me and told me I wasn't Luna material. Now live with it. Kael's face had gone pale. Alara, please. I made a mistake. You made 1,000 mistakes for 9 years. Her voice remained calm. But that's not my burden to carry anymore. You wanted me gone. I'm gone. Be happy about it. She turned to walk away. I loved you, Kael said desperately. Alara stopped, looked back over her shoulder. No, you didn't. You loved the idea of someone who would worship you unconditionally while demanding nothing in return. But that was never love, Kael. That was just convenient. She walked away without looking back. Behind her, Kael stood alone, finally understanding what he'd lost. And finally understanding it was too late. 4 days after the summit, a second letter arrived. This time, it was delivered directly to Alara by a young Iron Ridge scout who looked uncomfortable in Silvercrest territory. Alpha Aldrich requests your presence, the scout said, handing her the sealed envelope. For formal testimony, he said to tell you it's your choice, but he hopes you'll come. Alara broke the seal. Inside formal tribunal documentation, official notice of PAC tribunal, accused Celine Rivers. Charges: falsification of evidence, manipulation of PAC leadership, deliberate sabotage of PAC operations. Date: 4 days hence. Primary witness requested Alara Grayson, formerly of Iron Ridge PAC. She read it twice, then looked up at the scout. Tell Alpha Aldrich I'll be there. Theron insisted on accompanying her. So did Declan and Riven. You don't have to face this alone, Theron said as they prepared to leave Silvercrest. I know, but I want to. Alara adjusted her jacket's simple, professional Silvercrest colors. She hurt me. She manipulated Kale. She damaged Iron Ridge's operations. If my testimony helps prevent her from doing it to another PAC, another wolf, then I need to be there. Then we're coming with you. The drive to Iron Ridge took 90 minutes. Alara spent most of it silent, watching familiar territory appear through the windows. Mountains she'd seen every day for 9 years. Forests she'd walked through countless times. It should have felt like coming home. Instead, it felt like visiting a museum dedicated to someone else's life. Iron Ridge's Great Hall could hold 200 wolves comfortably. When Alara entered, it looked like every single PAC member had shown up. They filled the benches, lined the walls, crowded the gallery above. The air hummed with tension and anticipation. Alpha Aldrich is set at the head of the hall, elevated on the Alpha's platform. Magnus stood beside him, expression grave. And on the other side, Dane Ironwood, Kale's younger brother, 26 years old, built like a warrior, but with their father's thoughtful eyes. Alara noticed immediately Kyle was not on the platform. Instead, he sat in the front row with the senior warriors. His face was carefully blank, but his hands were clenched tight against his thighs. Demoted already. Aldrich stood as Alara approached. Alara Grayson, his voice carried across the silent hall. Thank you for coming. Alpha Aldrich. She inclined her head respectfully. You may sit with your Alpha in the witness section. Theron, Declan, and Riven took seats on the right side guests from another PAC here by formal invitation. The hall doors opened again. 2 warriors escorted Celine inside. She'd dressed carefully. Modest clothing, hair pulled back, makeup minimal. The picture of innocent confusion. But when her eyes found Alara, hatred flashed across her features before she could school her expression. Aldrich's voice cut through the murmurs. This tribunal is called to order. Celine Rivers stands accused of falsifying evidence, manipulating PAC leadership, and deliberately sabotaging PAC operations. The charges are serious. The evidence will be heard by the full PAC. At the end, judgment will be rendered. He looked at Celine directly. Do you understand the charges against you? I do, Alpha. Her voice was small, wounded. But I swear they're false. I never meant any harm. We'll determine that through testimony. Aldrich sat. Beta Magnus, present your evidence. Magnus stepped forward, holding a thick folder. 4 days as Beta assistant, he began, his voice flat and factual. In that time, Celine Rivers caused more operational damage than Iron Ridge PAC has seen in 5 years. He laid out the first document. Day 1 misplaced critical patrol reports for the eastern border. This resulted in a 6-hour gap in coverage that could have allowed rogue incursion. Day 2 failed to track a supply shipment. The kitchen ran out of food for 2 days, 73 PAC members affected. Day 3 mixed up territorial coordinates in communication with Northridge PAC. Nearly caused a border incident, only avoided because their beta called to verify confused by the impossible numbers. Day 4 lost trade agreements worth $42,000. Documents were found torn and scattered in a storage room she had no authorization to access. Magnus set down the folder. These are not the mistakes of someone overwhelmed. These are the mistakes of someone either catastrophically incompetent or deliberately destructive. Celine's face had gone pale. I was trying my best. I didn't understand the systems. The systems Alara Grayson designed are used by 6 different PACs successfully, Magnus interrupted. They're color-coded, cross-referenced. A junior assistant could manage them. You either chose not to learn them or chose to destroy them. Aldrich nodded slowly. Noted. What else? The warriors have testimony. One by one, 4 males stood. The first was Marcus, a senior warrior Alara had known for years. He looked ashamed as he stepped forward. I witnessed Celine Rivers stage the ledger incident, he said quietly. I was in the hallway outside the council room. I saw her knock the ledger off the table deliberately. Then she positioned herself to look like she'd been trying to help when Alara returned. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Why didn't you say anything at the time? Aldrich asked. Marcus's jaw tightened. Kale believed her. Speaking against the Alpha heirs chosen seemed unwise. Cowardice, Aldrich said flatly. But at least you're speaking now. Continue. I also witnessed the tea incident. Celine deliberately bumped Alara's arm to make the tray tilt. Then she made it seem like Alara's clumsiness. The second warrior, younger, nervous, stepped forward. I saw her go through Alara's office when Alara wasn't there. She was looking for things, touching documents. I thought maybe she was supposed to be organizing, so I didn't question it. But now, the third warrior confirmed seeing Celine scatter supply requisitions deliberately. The fourth testified that Selene had asked him questions about Alara's schedule, her routines when she'd be away from her office. I thought she was just trying to be helpful, but she was gathering information. By the time the fourth warrior sat down, the hall was completely silent. Then the pack doctor stood. Dr. Helena Walsh was 60 years old, respected with 30 years of medical practice behind her. When she spoke, people listened. I examined Selene Rivers the night of the alleged assault, she said crisply. The bruising on her cheek was consistent with self-inflicted injury, not an attack by another person. She held up a medical diagram. When someone is struck by another person, the angle of impact creates specific patterns. The bruising spreads outward from the point of contact. The depth is inconsistent deeper, where knuckles connect shallower around the edges. She pointed to marks on the diagram. Celine's bruising was uniform, shallow, and the angle was wrong. If someone had slapped her, their hand would have come from the side or front. Her bruising suggested downward pressure consistent with her own hand striking her own face while she controlled the force. Dr. Walsh lowered the diagram. I noted this in my medical report. I attempted to bring it to Beta Magnus's attention. Selene claimed I was jealous because my daughter had been passed over for Beta assistant in favor of her. She looked directly at Aldrich. I don't make diagnoses lightly, Alpha, and I don't accuse PAC members without evidence. But the medical facts are clear. Selene Rivers injured herself and blamed Alara Grayson. The hall erupted in whispers. Aldrich let them talk for 30 seconds. Then he raised his hand and silence fell immediately. Alara Grayson, and he said, you were the primary target of these manipulations. Will you testify? Alara stood, walked to the witness platform. Every eye in the hall followed her. She could feel Kale's gaze. Selene's hatred, Magnus's support, Theron's steady presence behind her. But what she focused on was Aldrich's eyes. Fair, waiting for truth. I served Iron Ridge Pack for 9 years. She began, her voice clear and calm. I held no grudge against Selene Rivers when she arrived. I had no reason to. She was introduced as a childhood friend of Kael's, a guest. She paused. The incidents began small. A misplaced report here, a scattered document there. Each time Selene positioned herself to look helpful while I looked careless. I couldn't prove anything. Each incident was too minor, too subtle. Alara's gaze moved across the assembled pack. The ledger, the tea, the supply requisitions. Every single time she staged the incident to look like my failure or my aggression. And every time Kael believed her without question. Her voice remained steady, factual. The night I left, I walked into Kael's study and found them together, kissing. When I dropped the documents I'd been carrying, Selene rushed toward me. She whispered that she'd won, that the Luna position was hers, that I'd never been worthy of it. The hall was utterly silent now. Then she grabbed my wrist and slammed my own hand into her face. The impact was hard enough to leave a mark immediately. She staggered backward, crying, claiming I'd attacked her out of jealousy. Alara's eyes found Kael's, and Kael believed her, without hesitation, without question. He didn't even ask for my side of the story. He simply decided I was guilty. She turned back to Aldrich. So when he slapped me and told me to disappear, I did. Because I finally understood that no amount of competence or loyalty would ever be enough for someone who'd already decided I had no value. The silence stretched. Then Aldrich spoke, his voice heavy. And you left because you chose yourself over staying in a place that made you invisible. Yes, Alpha. Thank you, Alara. You may sit. Aldrich turned to Selene. Do you wish to speak in your own defense? Selene stood. For a moment, her mask slipped. Alara saw calculation in her eyes, desperate, searching for an angle that might save her. Then the performance began. I made mistakes, Selene said, voice trembling. I was overwhelmed. I never meant to cause harm. And yes, I loved Kael, I still do. But I never tried to sabotage Alara deliberately. Any incidents were accidents, miscommunications. The pack doctor's testimony proves you self-inflicted injuries. Aldrich interrupted coldly. That's not miscommunication. That's deliberate fraud. I was desperate. Selene's composure cracked. Kael cared about Alara, and I thought if I made myself seem vulnerable, you manipulated a pack heir. Aldrich's voice was ice. You framed an innocent wolf. You damaged pack operations through either incompetence or sabotage, and frankly, I'm not sure which is worse. He stood. You came into this pack as a guest. Yes, and you were offered hospitality, trust, acceptance, and you repaid that by lying, manipulating, and deliberately harming a wolf who'd done nothing but serve this pack with loyalty and competence for 9 years. The hall remained silent, waiting. This tribunal finds Selene Rivers guilty of all charges. Selene's face went white. The sentence is immediate banishment. You have until sunset to leave Iron Ridge territory. You are forbidden from returning. If you set a foot on our lands again, you will be treated as a hostile rogue. 2 warriors moved to escort her out. Selene fought them, suddenly feral. This isn't fair, Kael, tell them. But Kael sat stone still, staring at nothing. As Selene was dragged from the hall, her screams echoing off stone walls, Aldrich turned to address the pack. Let this be a lesson, his voice carried to every corner. Manipulation and deceit have no place among us. And to those who witnessed wrongs and said nothing, his gaze swept across the four warriors who'd testified. Cowardice in the face of injustice enables evil. You saw what was happening. You knew it was wrong, and you said nothing because speaking up seemed inconvenient or risky. The warriors looked at the floor, shame clear on their faces. Do better, Aldrich said simply. All of you, we are stronger than this. We are better than this. He paused. Then there is one more matter to address. The hall tensed. Aldrich's gaze moved to Cale sitting in the front row. Cale Ironwood, stand. Cale stood slowly. His face was pale but set. You allowed yourself to be manipulated by lies. Aldrich said, his voice heavy with disappointment. You dismissed the testimony of a wolf who served this pack faithfully. You struck your future mate in anger, and when she left, you blamed her rather than examining your own failures. Cale said nothing. There was nothing to say. You have proven unfit to lead this pack. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Effective immediately, you are removed from the position of alpha heir. Your brother, Dane Ironwood, will assume that role. Dane stood slowly, shot clear on his face. He looked at his father, then at Cale. You will serve as head warrior, Aldrich continued. You may earn your position back through demonstrated leadership, wisdom, and humility. But that path will take years, perhaps decades, and it will require you to become someone very different from who you are now. He paused. Do you understand? Cale's voice came out rough. Yes, Alpha. Then sit down. Cale sat, and in that moment, every wolf in Iron Ridge pack saw the future shift. The old heir fallen, the new heir uncertain but willing, and the Luna who'd walked away finally vindicated. After the tribunal, Alara stood in Iron Ridge's courtyard, breathing in mountain air that smelled like memory. Magnus approached, his expression mixing pride and regret. You deserve this, he said quietly. Public acknowledgement, public justice. I just wanted the truth told. It's been told, and now everyone knows. Magnus glanced back at the hall. Celine has been tracked, leaving Iron Ridge territory. She crossed the northern border 2 hours ago. Scouts will monitor her movements until she's at least 200 miles away. Alara nodded. It was done. And Cale, Magnus's expression darkened. Learning what it feels like to lose everything because of poor judgment. Dane will make a good alpha. Better than Kyle would have been, honestly. More thoughtful, more willing to listen. Will Iron Ridge recover? We already are. Magnus smiled slightly. Dane asked me to stay on as beta for another year to help with the transition. I agreed, and he's already implementing some of your old systems. Even contacted Silvercrest for advice. Alara raised an eyebrow. Really? You built something good here, Alara. It didn't die when you left. It just needed new leadership to recognize its value. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Magnus pulled her into a hug. I'm proud of you, he murmured. Not for coming back, not for testifying, for choosing yourself, for building a life where you're valued. Thank you, Magnus, for everything. When they pulled apart, Theron was waiting by the vehicle. Declan and Ribbon stood beside him, giving her space, but ready to leave when she was. Alara took one last look at Iron Ridge pack territory. The mountains, the forests, the pack house where she'd spent 9 years becoming someone worthy of love she'd never actually receive. Then she turned and walked toward Silvercrest, toward home. Alara found Theron outside. How are you lighter, she said honestly, like I just set down something heavy I'd been carrying too long. Theron's expression softened. Good. Declan and Ribbon emerged arguing about wound treatment. When they saw Alara, Ribbon wrapped her in a hug. You were magnificent in there. I just presented data. You presented data while your ex-fiancé tried to publicly humiliate you, and you didn't even blink. That's magnificent. They piled into the vehicle. As they drove away, Alara watched the summit hall disappear. The last tie to Iron Ridge pack finally severed. She was free. Alara. Theron's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Yes. Welcome home. She looked at him, at Declan and Ribbon bickering in the back seat, at the forest flying past. Home. The word fit now. Finally. Thank you, she said, and meant it with everything she had, 6 months later. The Luna ceremony took place on the spring equinox when day and night balanced perfectly. Silvercrest pack gathered in the central clearing, 104 wolves now grown from 83. Alara stood in the center wearing white ceremonial robes, moonlight painting silver through her light brown hair. Theron faced her speaking the ancient words. Do you choose this pack? I do. Do you choose this path? I do. Do you choose me not by obligation or destiny, but by free will? Alara's voice rang clear. I choose you. I choose us. I choose this. The pack's howl rose 104 voices, harmonizing into something greater than the sum of its parts. Family. Home. Belonging. Everything Alara had spent 9 years searching for in the wrong place. And everything she'd finally found when she stopped searching and started choosing. Later, as celebration continued, Theron pulled her aside. Happy, deliriously. Good. He kissed her forehead. Because you're stuck with me now. I can think of worse fates. They rejoined the celebration hand in hand. 1 year after the Luna ceremony, Silvercrest had transformed. The pack had grown to 112 members wolves drawn by reputation, by word of a Luna who valued competence over politics. Alara's administrative reforms had spread to 3 neighboring packs. Efficiency metrics that once seemed impossible were now standard. But the numbers weren't what made her smile as she stood on the ridge overlooking the settlement. Her daughter, 3 months old, light brown hair already showing, slept against her chest in a carrier ribbon had sewn by hand. Small fists curled against fabric. Theron appeared beside her arms, wrapping around both of them. Council wants your input on the new trade framework, he murmured. But I told them you're busy. I'm always busy. You're allowed to rest, Luna. Luna, the title fit now, not because someone had assigned it, because she'd chosen it, built it, earned it through decisions and dedication rather than silent suffering. Below the pack moved through evening routines. Declan and Ribbon argued about something involving herbs. Warriors trained in groups her scheduling, innovation. Young wolves studied patrol maps she'd redesigned. Her pack, her home, her choice. The daughter against her chest stirred. Gray eyes opened Theron's eyes and stared up at her. She's going to be trouble, Theron predicted. Alara smiled. Good, the world needs more wolves who know their worth. And somewhere many miles away on Iron Ridge's border, Cale Ironwood stood alone watching distant mountains where Silvercrest lay. 2 years as head warrior now. 2 years of following his younger brother's orders. Dane was a good alpha, better than Kyle would have been if he was honest. The pack had stabilized under his leadership, but stability wasn't the same as thriving. Magnus had retired 6 months ago. The new beta was competent, but lacked the instinct that came from decades of service. Things ran, they just didn't flow. Not the way they had when Alara held everything together. Cale touched his jaw, remembering the feel of his palm connecting with her cheek. The sound. The way she'd stood there, refusing to cry. He'd told himself for months that she deserved it, that she'd attacked Celine, that her leaving proved she was weak. But warriors didn't lie to themselves forever. She hadn't attacked Celine. He'd known it even then, somewhere beneath the anger. He just wanted an excuse to push her away, to justify choosing the woman who made him feel wanted over the woman who'd actually valued him. And she hadn't been weak. She'd been strong enough to walk away from 9 years of investment, strong enough to start over, strong enough to build something better, strong enough to stop loving him. That was the part that burned, not the loss of her labor, not the administrative chaos, the loss of someone who'd looked at him once like he hung the moon and would never look at him that way again. Wind carried distant sounds across neutral territory. If he listened carefully, he could almost hear Silvercrest Pack's evening song, unified, harmonious, happy. Cale turned away from the border and walked back toward Iron Ridge. Some mistakes couldn't be undone. Some wolves once lost were lost forever. And the Luna who'd walked away had found something he'd never given her. A place where walking away wasn't necessary, because she'd finally found a place worth staying.